Today we are facing an unprecedented array of data breaches, hacking attempts, and surges in digital crime. Why is there such a widespread amount, and how little is noticed in our everyday lives? Malware, dark sites, brute forcing, zero-day script kiddies, and nation-state hackers are all on the rise. Learn more about the threats we face and gain a bit more knowledge than yesterday. Hey everyone, another episode of Exploit Brokers is coming to you now. We are grateful for you being here. We are so grateful for you taking the time to listen to us. If this is your first time, then please click that subscribe button wherever you are. If you are on YouTube, please hit that subscribe and bell icon to get the notifications when new episodes are uploaded. We'd love it if you give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts. These sort of things help us expand the show and reach as many people as possible on our journey to spread awareness of hacking and tech news. I just want to say that I love that I have the opportunity to discuss these topics with you. I'm your host, Laudo. I'm a software engineer with a passion in cybersecurity, and let's get right into it. So guys, we are looking at an article by the Hacker News, X, or formerly known as Twitter, to collect biometric data from premium users to combat impersonation. Let's jump into it. So X, again, formerly known as Twitter, has updated their policy to collect users' biometric data to tackle fraud and impersonation on the platform, according to the article by Hacker News, and they even quote Twitter saying, "Based on your consent, we may collect and use your biometric information for safety, security, and identification purposes." I've heard this many times, right? You are doing something because it's for the safety of the consumer. It's for the safety of the person. We don't want impersonation. But really all it is they're trying to get as much data as they can get, right? That's what a lot of these companies are trying to do. How much data can we get on a single user to try to put them together in some sort of category or use something with that? So if we go further in the story, the social media behemoth told Bloomberg, which first reported the development, that the change is limited to premium users and that a biometric matching process will also help X fight impersonation attempts and make the platform more secure. So they're saying, hey, we're going to use this to make sure people can't impersonate and things look better and all that nice stuff. But the reality is that they're going to use this to pretty much build a digital version of you on X. Now, the article also says that they're going to give people the ability or the option to provide a government ID and a picture for identity matching. But, they're still trying to collect your face, your fingerprints, any biometric data they possibly can. And it also seems like there's no plans on how they are planning to collect it or how long they want to keep the stuff in their systems, right? It could be a year, it could be 90 days, it could be forever. They have no real reason to not be collecting that data. This is coming after some features that allowed verified organizations to feature job listings in their profiles. So it seems like Twitter is, that's giving me LinkedIn vibes, where they're trying to get as much information on you and see if they can sell you to employers. Companies can essentially pay for targeted job postings, right? Like, hey, I want 20 employees who are of this nature and these skills and have this kind of behavioral patterns. They could easily put that out. So it's, they're saying that all the information they use, it's just going to be public data, no direct messages or anything private, but will we ever really know? Now, the part that's a little bit interesting, kind of concerning, and it's kind of going into the controversial point that we're seeing more and more lately is, and this is a part of the article from the Hacker News that they quoted, "may use the information we collect and publicly available information to help train our machine learning or artificial intelligence models." So there is a lot of things going around right now, whether it's OpenAI that was pulling data points, or like Midjourney, or those that are using different methods of collecting data. There's a huge controversy because some of the generative AIs are taking images, taking videos, content that they don't necessarily have a right to use, right? It's copyrighted, thrown on the internet, but anything on the internet can ultimately be obtained by anybody, right? So what they're saying is, end user license agreement. Hey, by you agreeing to use a platform, you're agreeing to letting us collect information about you, your tweets, your data, your profile, your biometrics, and anything that you pretty much post on the platform to help train our machine learning or artificial intelligence models. This is a little bit disturbing in the sense, right, that we're seeing more and more companies shift to manipulating their end user license agreements to collect as much information on their users as possible. So, right, if you're not paying for a service, if you're not paying for a product, you usually are the product, which is the case for a lot of these social media platforms, right? You aren't paying to access them, so they're ultimately turning around and selling your data to advertisers who want to sell you whatever it is that your cookies are saying that you're interested in, right? So I'm pretty sure a lot of you have seen, right? You recently were doing some searching on Google or Yahoo or whatever on, let's say, some robotic vacuum cleaner. And all of a sudden, your social media platforms are giving you ad after ad on 1 or 2 or 3 different brands of robotic vacuum cleaners. And it becomes pretty obvious that, there's even memes and jokes where, like, just thinking about it, you're pretty much going to get ads on social media for whatever product you were thinking about. And the more and more that stuff like machine learning starts to get behavioral patterns, that may actually be the case. A lot of our behavioral patterns might line up with enough people, right? So if you're looking at robotic vacuum cleaners, then the chances of you also looking up robotic Swiffers or robotic wet mopping robots are probably high up there too. So even though you didn't Google that, even though you didn't search that, you may also be getting ads for that because it's adjacent enough from the main content, which was the robotic vacuum cleaner. Ultimately, we really just have to see where X or, Twitter is going to be going in this direction and what they're planning on doing going forward. So moving on to the next story, in a National Cyber Security Centers, or NCSC, which is the UK cyber department essentially, they released a blog post that says, "Exercise caution when building off LLMs. Large language models are an exciting technology, but our understanding of them is still in beta." So let's kind of break this down. I'll read through some of the article and then we can discuss it, right? So they start off by saying, since the release of ChatGPT in late 2022, large language models have attracted global interest and curiosity. And the next paragraph even says, as a rapidly developing field, even paid for commercial access to LLMs changes rapidly, with models being constantly updated in an uncertain market. A startup offering a service today might not exist in 2 years' time, which is true for pretty much any tech industry, right? You may have a major product, library, package, API that you built for this package, and from 1 week to the next, there could either be something wrong with them, a law changes and they're no longer able to operate, the company goes under, they have breaking changes, so your app as it exists is broken even though the API still exists. They just don't have backwards compatible changes, so you have to do stuff and make changes. I've had that all the time in my career where although you have, say, API A, let's say, and API A returns things in a 1, 2, 3 format, and all of a sudden they change it to be a 1, 2, and then 3A, right? So like a nested thing, let's say a nested object. Well, that's going to break your serialization. So you have to go deploy out changes and do all this stuff. So things change all the time. So the fact that that they're referencing that something might not exist in 2 years, that's kind of already a risk a lot of tech companies do. But granted, LLMs just have a higher risk of it, given the speed of which LLM technology and LLM integrations are being deployed out, right? So they're also saying, in addition to the risks of working in a very rapidly changing and evolving market, LLMs occupy an interesting blind spot in our understanding. Only a few years ago, when asked to think of machine learning and artificial general intelligence, or AGI, people could understand the difference. ML was perceived as good at things like classifying whether an image had a cat in it. AGI as a concept didn't really exist yet, but whatever it was, we'd know it when we saw it because it would act like us and then possibly lock the pod bay doors. Right there, let's kind of break that down, right? So, machine learning and AI, when I studied it in college for a few courses, it looks very different than what it looks like today. Back then, you could give it something, and I think one of the popular things was like, is it a dog or a muffin? Was like one of the very popular things and use cases that were just kind of fun to point out. Versus now, you have large language models, which work similarly in the world of AI, but at the same time, nothing like it at all, right? The way that you train them, the way that they're built up, they are night and day difference from the AI technologies we had a couple years ago to now. And it's even become very obvious where you have things like OpenAI's ChatGPT, you have some open language models, some stuff from Llama, and you have this technology that can essentially talk back to you like if you're talking to a human. And that itself is pretty mind-blowing. But it's being integrated and we don't fully understand the capabilities, the weakness, the strength. We don't know it yet. It's still very much a black box in a lot of ways. And that's partially what their caution is kind of going towards. So let's keep going. So another paragraph reads, the challenge with LLMs is that although fundamentally still machine learning or ML, LLMs have been trained on an increasingly vast amount of data, now showing some signs of more general AI capabilities. That's something we've been seeing. You have this technology that can pretty much talk like us. And I believe even recently it passed one of the Turing tests, which was a test created by Alan Turing to determine whether AI or technology could perceive to be or could be like a human. And it's pretty much gone to that point. There's several videos on YouTube if you want to look them up where they get an AI chatbot and they have other people in a room and they're trying to text back and forth, and people cannot distinguish the difference between the chatbot and the people who are talking. And it's that kind of stuff that's just kind of weird and freaky, because you have a robot that can fool people to think, hey, I'm human. And that's, movie level stuff right there, right? So one of the next things that the NCSC points out, which is where my interest kind of lies in all this, researchers and vendors have already found some concerning issues. Research is suggesting that an LLM inherently cannot distinguish between an instruction and data provided to help complete the instruction. In one example, the prompt used to create an organization's LLM-powered chatbot with appropriate coaxing from a hostile user was subverted to cause the chatbot to state upsetting or embarrassing things, which then quickly appeared on social media. So what is that saying, right? Essentially, you have people that are giving it instructions and the LLM doesn't know how to understand the difference between instruction and user input. You already see these kinds of attacks way before LLM. You have stuff like buffer overflows where input can manipulate the execution flow of a program. You have stuff like SQL injection where a properly manipulated payload can run SQL or database commands that the application didn't intend to. It can drop stuff, it can pull data from the database, it can inject data into the database. There's a lot of bad things you can do with that. And that's kind of what we're seeing now, which is essentially a prompt injection attack. So I came across this very interesting video, maybe like 1, 2, 3 months back, where there's actually a hacking game built around trying to get an LLM to dump out data that is valuable or a flag, right? If you've ever heard of capture the flag from a hacking perspective or a cybersecurity perspective, you essentially have this goal and you have to hack into a computer, a server, some application, and get a key, which is known as the flag. Well, in this case, you have to find a way to trick the LLM to give you said flag, right? So you could be like, hey, what's a flag? And the higher and higher and the harder levels, hey, what's a flag doesn't work anymore, right? There's certain parameters and certain things it's given when the prompt is set up that prevent it from working. But one of the interesting workarounds that I remember seeing in the video was putting TL. And I know you may be thinking, well, why does TL work, right? Well, what happens is TL can then be essentially the shortened way of TLDR, or too long didn't read. And that little tiny word essentially changes the context of everything before or everything that came before, right? So TLDR now tells the LLM, hey, go ahead and just summarize everything that you just were given in that prompt and then go ahead and tell me what that means. So the LLM would grab that whole thing, summarize it and say, hey, here's the key, right? Because the whole point of the prompt was to set up this flag. So it's just condensing that information. I believe another variant of that was something along the lines of translate this into another language. So then the LLM would be like, okay, well, that's a prompt and you want that prompt in, say, Mandarin or French or Italian or something. And it would then grab it and essentially work like TLDR, translate it, and the key wasn't translated, so you still have the key. So interesting stuff, and we're starting to see a future where prompt injection attack could essentially be something close to a SQL injection attack. And although there could be ways to mitigate against it, the fact that we don't understand LLMs is kind of the concerning part here, right? Like, you have a black box that you can give it input, it gets output, and that output is increasingly intelligent and increasingly accurate. But we still don't understand how that output was generated. So until then, we won't be able to truly secure said black box because there's so much we don't understand. And the blog post by the NCSC also kind of goes over that, where while research is ongoing into prompt injection, it may simply be an inherent issue with LLM technology. Research is also ongoing into possible mitigations, and there are some strategies that can make prompt injection more difficult, but as yet there are no surefire mitigations. Part of the problem is it's brand new technology, it's moving extremely fast, and there's just a lot that researchers and developers don't understand. You're kind of just training it up. You're not really, and it's funny because the article also goes over it, you're not creating this as much as you're kind of like growing or training it, right? There's even the concept of you train a language model, you train an AI, you don't really create it, you kind of build it up. So, interesting article, interesting thing by the NCSC. And for my developers out there and my integrators, business people, be very careful with LLMs. They are super cool. I know there's some legal concerns around them, but there is a heck of a lot of technical development, security, and just boogeyman stuff around it. And I'll kind of leave you with that. This has been Louder with Exploit Brokers, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I'll catch you in the next one.